And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention to roll call.
That's right, brother. We're back. It's Monday. You know, most people hate Mondays, but not when it's podcasting. So good morning, 8:05 live Eastern time, and of course 5:05 coast to coast on the Pacific coast, Pacific time, bright and early. Grab your coffee, grab your donuts. Let's talk about what's going on. Big news. No surprise. This particular topic is very reflective of what's going on in myself and John in the podcast. So shout out to everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. I had an awesome weekend. Did some rock climbing in California, pretty cool, in a spot called Vasquez Rocks, where they actually film a lot of movies over there. They even filmed Blazing Saddles. I thought it's kind of funny because Patrick Donahue made a reference to Blazing Saddles last week. So shout out, lawsuit alleges New York City's Watchdog retaliated against NYPD detectives investigating corruption. John, what are your immediate thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think considering that we said that all of these, that the Internal Affairs Bureau, the NYPD, and DOI were both captured under the Adams administration, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. It's like, people like, oh, these guys are lying. I was like, really? I was like, because I've been, if they're lying, I'm a liar. If they're lying, Eric's a liar. If they're lying, I mean, I don't know every little integral part of their story, but I know the overall picture is people were placed in DOI to be watchdogs to protect the corruption, not to fight against it. And so I could only imagine what the hell is going on and what is still going on, as a matter of fact, in Group 1. I don't care about the whole new face of Group 1. I think that was all a PR campaign. Actually, those guys should sue. If you got charged with nothing and you got transferred out, you should probably sue. But, expect something coming from us.
Well, according to that article, they already filed a lawsuit. And apparently one of the guys retired already. He's actually a former Marine. His name is Vidot. I think is how you pronounce it. Vidot or Vito. I guess that's how you would say it. He retired already, and in the article, his name is Seidman. He has 17 years on, so he's got a couple of years to go, and he knows he's going to be facing a tough next 3 years to get to retirement. So it's interesting. No surprise, John. We talked about this all the time. Even when I was getting my First Amendment speech was suppressed by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and we both decided, hey, let's make a complaint to DOI. We made I made a complaint to DOI in reference to that. Like, where's that going? DOI is under Mayor Eric Adams. So, sure enough, I didn't get too much information on their investigation, but they started to let me speak. And now, when I do the CCRB virtual monthly meetings, I'm the first one to speak. But other than that, they didn't tell me the details of the investigation. John, if you remember, they didn't tell us anything. So, no surprise. What's interesting about this, if we go back to the days of Serpico, and Serpico says it till today, that there's pretty much no avenue to report corruption without retaliation. So what's the best prediction of the future is a reflection of the past and what's going on now. So if anything, he's right about that. There is no avenue, especially now. It's even more difficult when you're making a claim against the upper echelon. The retaliation and the speed bumps and the obstacles that come in play with these corruption cases, they just fire right back. What do you think?
I think for years it was like, especially when we were in the job, you could actually, like, civilians could actually report corruption against lower ranking individuals. And I think that Internal Affairs was effective at responding to those complaints. I don't believe Internal Affairs has been ever effective at proactively rooting out corruption inside the NYPD at any level. But I think, like, when complaints were filed in the past against officers and there was corruption alleged, I think that they did do a good job at identifying who it was and removing them from the job. Now, what I've been saying since I've been on the job and even since I left is that Internal Affairs, however, when it comes to high-ranking officials in New York City, high-ranking officials in the NYPD, they actually are there to deflect whatever the complaints are from. They're actually the protection for the upper echelon of the NYPD. Now, obviously, they don't, IB Group 1 or Group 25, they don't investigate top officials in the Adams administration, right? They only deal with the NYPD. So, they're not going to investigate, let's say, deputy mayor of public safety or a deputy mayor in another form. They don't have the ability to do so. It's not in their purview, right? They only work to investigate members of the NYPD. Under Eric Adams, however, it's been a big problem. Now, am I going to say that every police commissioner and every chief of department was the best person in the world? No. I'm not going to say that at all. But I don't think we've ever seen anything like we've seen under the Eric Adams administration. And what it exposed is that the system's highly flawed. Because something that these gentlemen are alleging in here is that Jeffrey Madry, who's the chief of department, was fully aware of what was going on in their investigation that was happening in DOI. Now, let's talk about that, right? Because I just said IAB investigates the NYPD, and they don't investigate high-ranking New York City officials. Who does? DOI. Why? And DOI, by the way, when it relates to anybody 2-star or above, more than likely is going to get the case. So if you make an allegation on Jeffrey Madry, like, hey, he just started the sex for overtime program in the chief of department's office, I think it violates our equal opportunity law. I don't think it's legal. It feels like prostitution to me in this office. Yeah, more than likely, DOI is going to get that complaint. But the NYPD has assets inside of DOI. So Jeffrey Madry is being alleged that he fully knew about the investigation that was going on inside of DOI. So, when people were calling me in the past, I filed a complaint with DOI, I was like, sure you want to do that? Sure you want to do that? And they're like, why? I'm like, you know who appointed the head of DOI, right? They're like, no, who? I was like, yeah, Eric Adams. So it's the whole system's been captured, dude. So I don't know the merits of that complaint. We'll get into all of the post article. Maybe we'll read a little bit of that complaint. But I mean, the overall purview of the picture they're spelling out is the same picture that we've been painting for 2 years. New York City has been captured.
Shout out to Ron Layson. Absolutely reflecting the same thing that we're saying right now. He says active NYPD should not be assigned to DOI, Department of Investigation. They should give the waiver and hire retired detective squad members to conduct the investigations. Spot on. I agree, because there would be no leverage in this case. But what we've shown with the case with John and myself, the allegations of corruption that John and I have alleged on behalf of ourselves as individuals and as a team on this podcast, as New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast, our claim to internal affairs has been completely stonewalled, has been misdirected. We've made some serious allegations of corruption that include a large portion of the upper echelon that actually stems into the Adams administration. And we kept all our communication by email because we knew from the onset of it, when this investigation commenced, that this would be completely misdirected. It would be a lot of deflection there. And we look forward to eventually start to FOIA a request to get the documents and the discovery involved in this entire case. And we can pretty much assume that John and myself were just completely defamed in this case, because we've seen it. We've seen the template with the Internal Affairs Bureau when it comes to other cases, such as Dana Rachel. We saw the smear campaign on Dana Rachel for her claims. So if anybody wants to look into that, we've mentioned before on prior podcasts, Dana Rachel made some serious claims of allegations of rape, brought the attention to the upper echelon, and for that she was smeared. And her template was exactly reflective of John and myself and others that make claims with Internal Affairs. So the problem with DOI is exactly that. Eric Adams does appoint it. But again, this goes back to, I love using that term that Sal Greco uses, low information people. I mean, people don't really understand how the system works. That Mayor Eric Adams appoints the police commissioner. Mayor Eric Adams appoints DOI. Mayor Eric Adams is responsible for appointing certain judges when it comes to certain cases that have not went the way that NYPD expected. So unfortunately, a lot of the rank and file, they're overwhelmed with misinformation, and they really don't understand how the system works. So, yeah, sometimes they're like, why did this happen? Or what's going on? Because they don't really understand the system. So if you want a breakdown of it, Defiance Unfiltered, our friends and listeners, we're giving you the real breakdown, the real perspective of what's going on. And I think Ron Layson hit spot on. It should be retired detectives that actually fill those seats at DOI, not active members. That's a major problem. And of course, you're in a very precarious position. If Jeffrey Mantry, former chief of the department, says, hey, listen, give me the information on this case to an active member, what are you going to say? I'm not going to give it to you. And then your career is in shambles, and then your career is seized, captured, as John would say, captured. I agree. You're in a bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, what do you like? What is it that you're gonna do, right? So if it's like, oh, give me the information, what is it that you're gonna do? No, you're not allowed to get it. Who are you running to? There's nobody to run to, And I laugh. I constantly laugh. Like reporters reach out to me. Oh, do you know anyone that wants to talk to me about that? I'm like, no. Do you know anyone else talking about this? No. They're like, why not? I'm like, what do you mean, why not? I'm like, they're working. They're afraid. They're afraid for their careers. They're afraid for their safety. I'm like, I don't understand. You people are all reporting on what's going on. You're fully aware of what's going on. There's a criminal enterprise controlling New York City. Yeah, but they're cops. I was like, all right, but they don't want to lose their careers. What about the retired guys? I'm like, they're afraid. I mean, it's not hard. Like, this isn't like, I was like, I don't understand like what you guys aren't seeing. The whole system has been captured. There's no one to report to. I was like, oh, and then by the way, if it gets found out that this person was speaking with you, right? If it gets found out that this person was speaking to you and something happens to them and they sought to be retaliated against, more than likely, you're not even going to write a story about it. So no one's even going to know what happened. I was like, so no, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to talk to you. I'm retired. The only reason we're out here is because it is what it is. Like we're walking with the truth. That's it. It's a crazy thing, and a new form of reality. I think for the police department and for media, it's like people who actually understand the system and know what's going on and are unafraid to talk about what's happening because we don't owe favors to anybody. We don't care what you're going to say about us. Are out here and giving our opinion, our honest opinion, and using our God-given First Amendment rights to say what we want to say and what we think and how we see it. And, everyone's so offended by it. You're retired. Go away. I'm like, why are you following my page, dude? Like, why are you listening to us? Like, what's up with you? Like, if this is bothering you, it's a very simple click of the button. You just delete, block, don't come on, don't listen. Or you could be like, you know what? That guy's dead wrong. And for once, instead of hearing someone blab to you in front of a microphone, and instead of like being talked down to from a podium and being yelled at, like the upper echelon of the NYPD consistently does, like the NYPD pays to do to you, you could actually come on and have a respectful conversation, but you don't want to do that. So it just shows. It just shows. Yeah, like you said, it is like, and that's the problem with cops is that they really don't understand the system, the majority of them. And I'm talking about even all the way up to the top, so how many people have learned stuff from this podcast? Like, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. It's like, yeah, because you weren't supposed to know it. Nobody was showing it to you. Like, you know what I mean? They want to keep you dumb, right? What's the saying? Treat them like mushrooms. Keep them in the dark, feed them shit, right? That's what they do. That's what they do to the public, and that's what they do to members of the NYPD. Treat you like mushrooms. They keep you in the dark, feed you shit, and they just could tell you anything. Oh, it's not me. It's Corporation Counsel. It's like, wait, aren't you in charge of Corporation Counsel?
Great comment here. Exactly what we've been saying on this podcast. Tom NB2A says, after being drafted and working in IAB and almost in DOI, as well as one of the only ways you can get some fairness is to have an elected police commissioner or commission of some kind. Right. That's exactly what we've been saying, is that ultimately it's a corrupted system because Eric Adams appoints the police commissioner. Eric Adams puts the people in DOI. So this is a problem, right? Who do they report to? Eric Adams. So we've been saying that for a long time, and if I had my way, I think that each county or each borough would have their own police department with their own sheriff that would be an elected official, and that would combat the corruption that we have in this city. Could we still have some corruption? Sure. You could always have corruption, but I think we could have a better job of monitoring it when we have elected officials, especially when we have a smaller breakdown. A large police department like this, under Mayor Eric Adams, is just a major problem. And I think there's a great point to reflect on what you're saying, John. I agree. Are there past police commissioners and other administrations that probably had some forms of corruption, even under the era that we worked in? And arguably, we always say we were in the best era. Could there have been levels of corruption at the top? I mean, a lot of the stuff was exposed when there was corruption with the rank and file. We saw cases of corruption. There's no doubt about it. It wasn't at a large scale. But could there be? Yes. But I think if there was, I'm sure there probably was some, you would have to take a deep dive into it and some real investigations. But with this administration, it's so blatant, and there's so many aspects and so many different levels that you don't even need a deep dive and a full investigation to see it. So that's really been my point, is that here we are. You know, right now I'm in California, John's in Florida, and Sal Greco's in Florida, and Marlon Bethel is at his computer also, and we're not actually in the inner linings of the NYPD as we speak. We're not active there anymore, and blatantly we can see it. It's just so obvious, and that's why we say to some people, why don't you see it? And maybe some people do. They're just afraid to speak up. And here's a reason why. Because if you do speak up, if you do your job when it comes to corruption, it involves the upper echelon, well, there's hell to pay. Something John and I used to talk about a lot in this podcast is, as a cop, you shouldn't be able to report corruption anonymously. But you know what, John? When it comes to the upper echelon, you kind of have to. There's no other choice, because you're facing some serious retaliation and your career could be destroyed, because that template is already prepared and already ready to smear and defame that complainant. So it's a major problem. The problem is, at this point, is can we get over this obstacle? Can we get over this hurdle? Can we create measures to do that? What are your thoughts on that?
In this system right now, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Could it be done? Yes, of course. Things could be done, but it needs to be legislated and advocated for. First needs to be advocated for. You know, I think, and again, that's the bigger part, is like, and I think the difference here is, like, you know, as opposed to other police podcasts, is that we really dive into the politics of it and how heavily politicized the NYPD is. And I think that's what's very different about this. So when we look at the NYPD, and, you know, we're sitting here saying, you guys don't understand the NYPD, right? You don't understand the NYPD. You don't understand how it works. You don't understand how the systems that are in place that are involved in reporting corruption and things like that. You don't understand all those things. The same's true, and probably much worse, when we get to politics. You know what I mean? When we get to politics now nobody knows. Now it's not just the cops, it's the people too. But when we look at the NYPD, also, it's fair to say that the public doesn't understand what's going on in the NYPD either. So, yeah, I think that we could build a system like that through advocating, through pushing elected officials ahead that would possibly be interested in passing that legislation to create some type of law that we could actually change the system. Yeah, it could absolutely be done. But currently, as it sits right now, absolutely not. There is nothing that could be done. And so the thing is, here is, like, we have a systemically corrupt New York City Police Department. It's not even up for question, in my opinion. Oh, we changed. Now we have the 4th police commission. It's all clean because she transferred guys out of IAB. Like, who was charged in IAB? What crimes did they do in IAB? What about the people in the chief of department's office with the overtime? I think Jeffrey Madry's 30th day is today, actually. I think 30 days for Madry. I think he was suspended for 30 days. I'm pretty sure he's going to walk out of the door with a retired ID card. He's going to and a good guy letter. I'm pretty sure, you know. And so, like, what's changed in the system? Nothing. We have a systemically corrupt system. So now you're an officer, and you're aware of, and this wasn't happening, but let's just say, because it's possible, because we've seen that Everything's possible in the Eric Adams administration because the integrity is so low, if it's even there at all. Let's just say that the chief of department was running a sex trafficking ring. Let's just say that, or the police commissioner, or maybe him and his brother in conjunction with the club owner. Let's just say that. I'm not saying that happened, but I'm just rhetorically speaking, let's just say that they were involved in drug dealing, sex trafficking, all these things. Okay. So, and now you're an officer, you're a detective, you're a lieutenant, you're a sergeant, you're a captain, you're a deputy inspector, and bam, you come to this revelation. You're like, oh my God, they're involved in sex trafficking. What could you do to expose that? You're going to have to stay completely anonymous and expose it and see where the cards fall. Because if you come out, you will be retaliated against, and that will be the end of your career. And more than likely, they'll try to get you fired, and more than likely, they'll try to dirty up your personal name. And they'll go around, they'll do all these things, they'll have people threatening you. And ultimately, you may even be put in the position where you're working with these people and you find out. Now, what could you do there? You have one choice. You could leave your career. Your other choice is now you're partaking in the corruption. And what we're seeing is that, like in law enforcement currently, in society currently, masculinity has been so ripped out of society that the option is, well, what do you want me to do? I'm just doing my job. Yeah, so I'm involved in drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and all these things. And it's like, so when we had Vernon on and he was talking about, and I said what he said to me when we were offline. He said that, sometimes you just get too smart to go any further. And I think that's what happens when you're a mushroom and then all of a sudden some light shines in that window and you start growing and you start sprouting flowers and you see what the hell's going on. Unfortunately, when you're in a systemically corrupt department, you're most likely your only option is to leave, or else you're going to be part of that corruption.
Like, share, and subscribe at this point. Please click on it. Like, share, and subscribe if you like this material. Our friends and listeners, thank you so much. Share it out. Please put it out on X. Let's get this out there. Let's keep building together. It's 2025. We're talking about corruption in the NYPD. That's pretty much at this point, there's no avenue to report it. Now, if you report corruption on the rank and file, you can put your name out there and you can come out as a hero. But what we're talking about here is reporting corruption to the upper echelon. And there's pretty much absolutely no avenue. And what John's saying here, John, I really want to reflect on what you're saying. And I think you're absolutely right, John. I think you're spot on. If you report corruption on the upper echelon and you're an active member of the service, it's career suicide. There's no doubt about it. So if you become the unlucky one and the unfortunate person that's either assigned to investigate it, and somehow this becomes exposed in your investigation, that the corruption that you're investigating gets tied to the upper echelon, or somehow you're unlucky just to witness it and now you have to report it, John's right. You have two decisions to make. Do you join or do you end your career? And that's unfortunate. You could be unlucky. So that's why it's so important that the squeaky wheel gets the oil, that we put our foot down and really start speaking out about this. And we have to make some real changes. Because unless there are changes made, and at this point, I'm going to say no changes have been made. John, you're right. With the fourth police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, in her last speech about the state of the NYPD, she took some truths and she made it into a lie. And what she did is she referred to the leadership that we made some changes, and she made it seem very minor and very minuscule in these musical chairs of moving people around. But she didn't get down to the root of it and said, we uncovered and we exposed potential corruption, and we took a deep dive in and we're investigating, and we're actively investigating the members of internal affairs that were removed to determine what corruption aspects need to be fixed, that we're actually looking to make reforms and change the system that we have. She didn't say that. She just said we made some moves and we're moving on. So to me, when it comes to Jessica Tisch as the fourth police commissioner, it's business as usual and nothing has changed. Shout out to Ron Layson. You're on fire today. Got a hell of a comment here. I think it's spot on. Let me find it again because these comments are flying in. Here we go. The scary thing is that you can't even trust a special prosecutor from the state attorney general's office. She is entwined with this administration and Sal's favorite Bronx Cafe. Absolutely. Think about that. When Sal talks about Consofritos. This is the spot where everyone meets together. It's the meet and greet spot where we have Eric Adams there. You have Tish James. You have Kathy Hochul, Pat Lynch, former PBA president. You have the fraternal organizations that were having parties there. So this was the meeting spot where a lot of information got passed on. So if you're going to report corruption, well, potentially you have to think to yourself, all these people in these circles, they may be coming for you. And there's some nefarious characters that were hanging out there as well. Spot on to you, Ron Lacy. You're on fire today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, Ron's right. It's not just the city that's captured, it's the state. He's 100% right. The state is a systemically corrupt state. He's 100% right. Because that's the other thing, right? Like, so, you know, we're doing this podcast. We have Sal Greco on. Sal Greco saying, you know, these guys are all criminally associated, and he gives us some evidence of it. That's it. You know, sends the you know, does that. We do that episode, and next thing I know, the owner of that restaurant or the supposed partner of the police commissioner's brothers threatening me. So I make a complaint. I'm like, okay, you're going to threaten me. I'm not, you know, I've been around dirtbags my whole life. So I'm not like, I take those threats very seriously, you know, and I'm obviously not going to cower in a corner. I don't, you know, I've been on this earth for 45 years surrounded by wannabe jerk off losers that, you know, scales, like they're guys in Goodfellas that they've slithered their way to get to where that they're still walking the streets when they shouldn't be. So I take what I did. I said, okay, I'm just going to file a complaint and I'm just going to put it out there. File with IB, file with DOI, file with State Attorney General's office. Zero's done. Right? They stop because they don't want it, you know, and I go out online and I say that the police commissioner, Ed Caban's a dirtbag and why are his dirtbag friends threatening me. Could someone explain to me why I'm being threatened by the police commissioner? Why is he hanging out with dirtbags? Why is he hanging out with known criminals, right? So then everybody backs off and everybody in the media is like, oh my God. And my own family is like, John, why don't you slow down a little bit? I was like, wait, hold on. I need to slow down? I said, somebody just threatened me for absolutely no reason. He's hanging out with the mayor and the police commissioner, and they're threatening me because they don't like the podcast. And I'm supposed to just back down? I was like, we're way past backing down. I'm like, this guy's a dirtbag. The police commissioner is a dirtbag. Why is he the police commissioner? Why is there a dirtbag in charge of New York City? And everyone's like, yeah, thinking I lost my mind and I'm off my medicine, but I'm not on any medicine and I didn't lose my mind. And then a few months later, what do we find out? We find out that, hey, there's a lot of allegations about a certain police commissioner's brother that they're running a racketeering extortion ring. Oh, well, there you go.
There it is. Double trouble. There's no doubt about it. Hey, Rob Lucash, here's a former chief that was on this podcast. I like Rob a lot. He was calls like it is. He says right here, reporting corruption on the upper echelon who are on interview boards, promotion panels for detective, special assignment sergeant detective squad is political suicide. You're absolutely right. And anonymous complaints go nowhere. Spot on. That is absolutely right. If you report anonymous, it's not going anywhere, right? Especially if you report about the upper echelon, they want to know who you are because to investigate this, they want to shut you down. And you're exactly right. So you're going to make complaints on the same people that are responsible and hold the cards for your career. That's why I say to people, when people tell me, and I say this before, and I'll say it again, really think about what I'm saying here. Oh, the job sucks. Who is the job? What is the job? You know who is the job? Boom. You're looking at it right there. The former commissioner, he was the job. The job right now, Jessica Tish, she's the commissioner. She's the job. Tiny Kinsella, first step, she's the job. John Shell, chief of department, he's the job. Cass Daughtry, deputy commissioner operations, he's the job. So when you say the job sucks, you're saying these people suck. And that's really what's going on, is because it's the people that hold the cards to this job. And that's why I say the job is the people. It's the people at the top. They're the job. They're the ones that hold the cards to it. So there's no doubt to me that there is absolutely no avenue at this point to report corruption. And, even if you went to the feds, good luck. Good luck. There could be some moles there too. So at this point, there's absolutely no avenue. We need some serious change. I mean, pretty much, and I think that's why the upper echelon, They don't care. They know that they're going to win. And you said it, John. If this is day 30 or not for Jeffrey Management, ultimately, what discipline is he facing? Nothing. He's still going to get 3 quarters. He's still going to get his good guy letter. The only thing he had was a little embarrassment and shame. And you know what? Over time, that goes away and people will forget about it. So the bottom line is nothing happens. John Shell, Kaz Daughtry, the Gotham brothers have been shamed in a DOI report for their unprofessionalism and their recklessness, for pissing matches on social media where they embarrassed the police department, and yet they have not been held accountable. If anything, they've actually been honored and been promoted. John Shell is your chief of department. Reckless on social media, unprofessional, pissing matches. Along with that, the same person that's responsible for this failed crime-fighting strategy, tactic of vehicle pursuits, which led to damage of property in this city and ultimately injury and death. And he was promoted. So there is no avenue. At this point, zero. Nothing.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, it's at the point that people really need to realize what type of society this is ripe for. I mean, America right now, New York City right now, like if New York City was the epitome of America, which thankfully it's not, but it's close to. It's very close everywhere. I don't care if you're in a red state or a blue state. Wherever you live, it's very close to what's happening in New York City, and it's ripe for a complete communist takeover because everybody just lives a lie. You're not allowed to tell the if you work in the police department right now, you're not allowed to tell the truth. You can't point out things that you know are wrong. You can't tell the truth, right? What happens right now? Like we put out a post the other day about Pitch talking about how these are merit-based promotions. These are merit-based promotions. What happens if you point out how there were numerous promotions on there that were anything but merit-based, and the people didn't actually deserve to be promoted at all, and there were a lot of people that deserved to be promoted that weren't? Your career's over. So you're living a lie, right? And that's why people are leaving in droves. So I put that post out, and everyone's attacking me because it was something about I just referenced Harrison's daughter because it was like the same thing as Shay's daughter. She goes to the real-time crime center with 2 years on the job, and then she goes to some squad and with three months ago, and then she's promoted to detective with like 4 years on the job. A little under 4 years on the job, excuse me, which is really only like 3.5 years on the job because you were in the academy for 6 months. And everyone's like, oh, it's because it was Harrison. It was because it was Harrison. It's because she's black. And I'm like, well, so then why were you like, what'd you say when I said it about Shay's kid? I'm just pointing out, I don't, they're like, you hate Harrison. I'm like, actually, I don't hate Harrison. I think he was much better than what we've had these last couple of chief of departments. I thought Harrison was a little bit better than the rest of them. I was like, so I don't hate Harrison. I'm just pointing out the fact that what Jessica Tisch said is not accurate. These aren't merit-based promotions. This isn't a meritocracy. She hasn't changed anything. It's the same exact thing, but I'm supposed to, you want me to live the lie with you, and I'm not going to. I'm not living the lie with you guys anymore. I stopped 3 years ago. And right now, everyone in the NYPD, some people aren't, and those people are sitting there saying, all right, I got 6 months left. All right, I'm going to leave 2 months from now. I'm leaving once I hit my 10 years. Those people aren't living the lie anymore, but they're not. You already lost those people, and those are the overwhelming majority of people that are sitting in the NYPD right now. They're holding on for dear life to keep healthcare for their children, to keep a roof over their head, to keep clothes on their back. But everyone's like, yeah, everyone. Did you see that? How about the report? How about the report yesterday that came out that 75% of Democrats in New York City don't feel safe and are ready to leave? And over half of them are ready to leave. Not 75%, but over half of the Democrats in New York City. So it's like we've been living a lie. Everything's perception versus fear. So it's not just in the NYPD. It's in New York City as a whole. 75% of the people now are admitting they don't feel safe from the Democratic Party, and half of those people are ready to leave New York City if it doesn't change. Have we not been living a lie for the last 6 years? Crime's down, it's perception, and no one said anything. And they were the ones guilty of it. Oh, look at me on the train. You walked down to the train platform on Bay Ridge, took a photo, and walked back up. You know, it's like we've been living a lie. The NYPD, like if you're in the NYPD, you're living a lie. Whether you are pretending that everything's fine or you know it's a lie, you're still living a lie.
Absolutely right. That's why John and myself, we'd never seek to have anyone on this podcast that's active. We've actually had people reach out to us. I've had people reach out to me. People reach out to John, like, "Oh, we want to come on a podcast." I'm like, "Well, you're active." John says the same thing, and they're adamant. "Oh, I don't care anymore." It's at the point where I don't care. No, I want to come on. I want to come on the podcast. I want to talk about what's going on. I'm like, "No, we're not putting you on." John and I have refused to put anyone active because we don't want to be responsible for the retaliation that you're going to face, and we know it. Look. There is absolutely no way you can tell the truth of what's going on in the police department. John and I are both in retirement. I'm retired September 2022. John left even before that. So we have a lot of distance removed from us. We're civilians right now. We're part of the community, and we can't even speak out. I mean, we do it anyway. But look, we have trolls monitoring this podcast on a daily basis. Trolls from the NYPD spend their entire tour watching this podcast, monitor our social media, trying to find anything they can to try to get me and John to shut this podcast down. If they could put us in jail, they would. And the only reason they have it is because they can't. But they're doing everything in their power. So imagine if you're in the police department and you're an active member of the service, the amount of pressure that you would get. Think about the amount of pressure they're trying to put on John and myself. We have been threatened. The lives of our children were threatened by a fake moniker known as All Cops Are Woke. Behind that is a member of the service. And we believe it's several members of the service, and we've been stonewalled by the NYPD. The Internal Affairs Bureau will not release us that information. John was threatened by a mobster that hangs out at Fritos with the upper echelon of the police department, with fraternal organizations, with the mayor of New York City, with various other high prolific politicians in New York State. I mean, think about how disgusting that is. The person behind All Cops Are Woke was a member of the service, and they will not release that information, threaten the lives of our children. How disgusting. This person shouldn't even be a police officer. This person should be charged with a crime and never held accountable, because there's every reason to believe the person behind that is not just rank and file, but directed by the upper echelon. And all the evidence that we have directs right in that direction. There's no doubt about it. We have the evidence, and you know what? It will unveil itself at some point, but it doesn't matter at this point, because the upper echelon has all the protections and has all the ability to weaponize the tools that they have to shut people down from speaking the truth. They'll exactly that. Like Rob Lukash said, you speak up, it's career suicide. You're done. Think about it. We're retired right now. It's just a podcast. We're giving our opinion, and you can't even speak the truth. And we have an entire team dedicated to monitor this podcast to try to uncover anything. Cops were going around asking questions about our careers in retirement, what we're doing, where do we live. You think they came up with that on their own? No, they're directed by the upper echelon. They're directed to try to unveil and try to uncover something about us to try to shut us down. If they could put us in jail, they would. Believe me. I have no faith in this administration. Absolutely no integrity. They're corrupt. They're disgusting. They're a disgrace. They're bums.
So let's just talk about how corrupted the system is, right, for a second. So when I was in internal affairs, one of the jobs I had there was I was in charge of assessments. So what did I do in assessments? I read every single IB log that came in every morning. Sometimes it was 300, sometimes it was 150, sometimes it was more than that. I read every single log in internal affairs. I would make sure that the investigator put the proper allegations and that it was being forwarded to the proper investigative group or went to the proper outlets. If it wasn't concerning the NYPD, that it went to DOI or wherever else it needed to go, and made sure whoever else needed to be notified on it was notified on it. I would read all of those things, and then I would bring them to a chief, who would then go through my assessments of it and say, yes, no, yes, no. And there were very little corrections made based upon my assessment, if any, right? So that's what I did. So when we reported the corruption, obviously, we reported it. This is the subject. These are the allegations against them. Here is the proof and why we're saying this. Here's the next subject. Here are the allegations where we're charging because we're not even alleging it, and here is the proof. Here is this, and here is the proof. And so, and then also part of my job was to determine what that case was. Was that allegation an OG, meaning it's outside guidelines? It goes down to your sergeant to investigate because you were wearing white socks, or there was a summons dispute, goes to your sergeant to investigate, goes back to the command. OG, outside guidelines. Or was it a misconduct case? It's going maybe to CCRB, order inspections, and maybe it was like you cursed at somebody. It was not serious misconduct, but it was misconduct. Then there was a C case, corruption, right? And then that would ultimately be the highest form of a case that there is. And so when we speak to the new internal affairs, they tell us that our case is an M case, a misconduct case. And I'm like, wait, time out. We alleged criminal association on every member of the NYPD. Or not on every member of the NYPD, excuse me, on every member of the upper echelon of the NYPD and some of their lower downs, and we gave you irrefutable proof of it. Irrefutable proof of criminal association. And the allegation alone makes it a C case. Yet you deemed it an M case. I'm like, then we alleged that the upper echelon of the NYPD were misusing overtime, misusing police resources in an attempt to defame us and intimidate us. Absolute crime. It's criminal. C case. C case. There's no doubt about it. That's the second allegation. The third allegation we gave you is that they're working with known criminals to do the same thing, defame and intimidate us. C case. Oh, the fourth thing. There's a member of your service, a supervisor, and he has a fake handle, and he threatened the life of my children and Eric's children online and our own lives. C case. Crime. Aggravated harassment, threats over the internet, felony. And you're going to have the nerve to sit there and tell me that this is an M case? Maybe if we didn't know it, maybe if we were mushrooms, maybe. But I used to tell you what things were. And now you're going to sit there and lie to me? Okay, no problem. No problem. The new IAB is going to have just the same problem as the old IAB. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, and I just wrote a simple phrase back to the guy because, again, we have to talk to internal affairs only through email because they will misconstrue your words and twist your words, even if you only talk to them via email. They will twist whatever you write. They'll twist it. And right now we haven't had a response because they're probably sitting with legal for the last month to respond to this. And I said, because what they said was that, well, some people have gotten charges and some people have gotten CDs. And I'm like, yeah, but our allegation was never against the lower down people that did those things. Our allegation said that they were ordered by the upper echelon of the NYPD. Our allegation has nothing to do with them. They're just there. They were used. They were stupid enough to do it, but it has nothing to do with them. We don't care about them. We don't care about them whatsoever. The complaint had really nothing to do with them. I said, so you substantiating some allegations against some of the subjects while turning a blind eye to the other allegations and ignoring the other subjects, it itself is corruption. So, I mean, you want to look at corruption. I know Harry Siegel wrote an article about how he feels to be attacked. Whatever happened in the media and that whole DOI report had absolutely everything to do with what started with us. But what happened with us is so much worse. And it's a complete highlight of the corruption that's happening. And so if they could do it to me and Eric, who understand how the police department works, who understand how all of these things work, who understand laws, what are they doing to the public? And we told you that before it happened to the media. And now we're seeing it also when now people are being punched in the face while they're in handcuffs and all these other things. And they're taking, the police commissioner, I'm going to investigate that because that's my boy. Oh, somebody stepped on the people's heads, I don't know. That was all right. Let's get them back to work real quick.
Well, that's exactly what we told the Internal Affairs. The communication that we had was very articulate. And we told the Internal Affairs Bureau that these are allegations that we made that are linked to the upper echelon and that we don't really care. We said we don't care, to be honest. We even indicated to Internal Affairs that we would have never brought these complaints forward about a captain, about rank and file members of the khaki pants unit and other members of the service that were targeting myself in this podcast. We're very tolerant. We didn't care. We're big boys. We can handle ourselves. But we made the allegation because we knew it was linked to the upper echelon. But what do we see is how do we cover and how do we conceal corruption? By cutting out with more corruption, by trying to hide this information was exactly that. And again, it proves everything that we've been saying, that the Internal Affairs Bureau protects the upper echelon by diverting their attention towards the rank and file and put the blame on the rank and file to deflect and protect them. So could we care less? They gave charges and command disciplines to rank and file members. Care less. We would have never made those.
Did we lose Eric? I think we just lost Eric. Yeah, we just dropped. Kaz will save us all. All right. So is he back, Eric? You back?
I don't know what happened here, but yeah, the bottom line is this. We could care less what the rank and file is saying. The point is that they were directed to, they were told to do it. And that's what we want to uncover in this investigation. And clearly, John and myself were not taken seriously. That's why I look forward once we get a FOIA request to see what detailed information. And I'm pretty confident that we were defamed and they tried to make it appear that we were some type of emotionally disturbed people that made a complaint, just as they did with Adrian Schoolcraft. I say we were Schoolcrafted. There's no doubt about it. So once we get that FOIA request, we'll definitely give it out to our friends and listeners and give out a lot of that information. There's no doubt in my mind there is no avenue to make and report corruption on the upper echelon. I could care less that they gave discipline to these cops. It's absolutely stupid. It doesn't do anything for us. It doesn't care. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah, Mike Freed says the investigation will conclude with them saying that it can't be proved that they did it. Exactly. I 100% agree with you. That's exactly what they're going to do, and that's exactly what Group 1 does. Is they substantiate charges against captains and lower downs while to alleviate what the upper echelon did. That's what they've been doing. We said that they've been doing that for 2 years. They'll prove that. And then that's fine. When we get that information, we'll put it all in a book or release it to the public. And we'll just show exactly how inept that person is. And I'm naming the names, by the way, too. I'm not going to not name, and then Sergeant, whatever your name is, said this, and Sergeant. And even though Sergeant, we submitted this photo to the Sergeant, he didn't see anything wrong with it. And even though you could see them in numerous different photos with these individuals, clearly associating with these individuals, and there's plenty of eyewitness ID that they're known friends and they've been friends for a very long time and they're hanging out together, still no association. Okay, no problem. So, that's fine. I don't care, So, embarrass yourself, embarrass the department. It's all good for me. I could give two craps.
That's why, John, it's absolutely ridiculous that sometimes the reporters ask you or ask me, is there anyone that will speak to us? And you talked about this earlier. The answer is no. I mean, of course not. I mean, they're terrified to watch this podcast, to actually utilize their name to admit they watch this podcast. There's a few people on here that actually use their name. And, we always say big balls to you. Shout out, like, for instance, Son, honestly, shows a lot of guts. But for the overwhelming majority, they're terrified to actually admit, not even use their name, just admit they even watch this podcast. They watch it in secret. Think how crazy that is, that they're allowing the NYPD to dictate what they could watch, what they could look at, how they could think. I mean, we want to talk about communism. Now we're getting to the job wants to tell you how to think. So, of course, what do you think is going to happen to someone that's actually an active member in the inner lines of the police department? You're up shit's creek. You can't make a complaint. Absolutely not. That's why these detectives, I tell you what, this guy retired right away. Clearly, he wanted to stay on the job. But Simon here has, according to this article, 17 years on. This is going to be a hell of a 3 years to pay. These are a hell of a 3 years he's going to face, and I hope he makes it out. Because there's every indication that they'll try to find something to terminate him. He's on an uphill battle, and he's swimming alone. Because you and I know, John, he's going to be a leper. There's not going to be other cops and detectives to stand next to him and say, hey, you reported corruption, we got you. You're going to say, we got to stay away from that guy because there's an avalanche coming, right? I got to watch out for me. We know the track record. When cops are in pickles, that brotherhood's that thin blue line, I tell you what, is paper thin. You're on your own. I know it. 8 sets of charges administratively. In 6 weeks, I went from Captain America to leprosy. People were terrified to even speak to me. So I know the feeling.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into this article a little bit. Jack, if you could pull up some of the photos of those 2 detectives, appreciate it. So let's get in this article a little bit. So 2 detectives faced brutal retaliation and fake rats while probing corrupt bosses lawsuit. Right. So we got about 780 people on here. Thanks for joining. We're going to get into this article. If you guys could just do us a favor, share out the space, we'd appreciate it. So here it goes. 2 NYPD detectives allege in a bombshell lawsuit filed Saturday that they have become modern-day Serpicos, investigating police corruption at the highest levels, only to be retaliated against by their own department and even mocked with images of rats on their desk. Detective William Simon, 42, and his partner, Anthony Vidot, 57, were assigned to the city's Department of Investigation in 2020 to root out corruption and bribery involving NYPD and city officials. Their lawsuit in the Supreme Court claims. One investigation involved allegations that clubs in Midtown and Queens were paying cops and their associates for special treatment, like not issuing fines for noise complaints and ignoring other violations, sources have said. So write that in there. Write that in there. What does that sound like to you? I think Eric's frozen again. So write what you hear is, I don't know what's up with Eric's mic, but what you're seeing is the same exact complaint that what happened, the guy in Coney Island said, right? I was having problems with the police. I reached out to this new unit, this whatever it's called, this Office of the Nightlife that Adams created because he got rid of the March program. And I reached out to this man who was working in his duty. I can't remember his name again. Keep forgetting the dude's name, but whatever. His name's not important. Ray Martin. I reached out to Ray Martin in the Office of the Nightlife, and Ray Martin told me to call James Caban's brother, Ed Caban's brother, James. And when I called Ed Caban's brother, James, he told me, give me $2,500 and I'll take care of it. He felt like he was being extorted. His business was ultimately, he didn't pay. His business was ultimately shuttered by the NYPD. He continued to have problems with the NYPD until it was shuttered. He filed reports. He went out online. He went to the media. The media actually covered the story. Ray Martin was immediately fired from the Office of the Nightlife, meaning that was substantiated what he said. He was immediately fired. No investigation. He was fired. So there were legs. And now these officers are claiming that way before that allegation came out, they had that allegation across their desk. And guess what happened? They started getting targeted because they investigated it.
You know what, John? If this was 10 years ago, you might think there was shock and awe. You might feel shock and awe yourself and say, no way, right? No way. Because we always talk about how we worked in the best era, the least amount of corruption. There was corruption, but we say most of the time it was moments of opportunity. But looking at it now, there's no doubt about it, because what we see with this administration at the upper echelon is a criminal enterprise. And I remember, John, you and I spoke about it. Once this corruption really started, this corruption probe really started to come at its head when it came to Ed Caban, former police commissioner, and his brother James Caban. And they started to investigate this, and they put detectives in DOI. We both said, wow. I think they sent 9 detectives there. I said, well, it seems to me that sounds like they're plants. There's no doubt about it that if you make a corruption complaint, you're sandwiched in. You have the NYPD, and you're between that and the DOI, and there's no escape out of it. This was, they did the right thing on their behalf, reporting corruption, especially with this upper echelon, and the corruption is in the public eye. Maybe they thought with the amount of corruption and the amount of exposure to the public as we speak, that they would have a chance of not being retaliated against. And sure enough, the storm kept coming. And that's where they're at. And, VDOT had to retire. Simon has 3 years left, and he's facing a hell of a battle. Nothing has changed at this point. Jessica Tisch is not that white horse. This is going to be 3 long years. Hell of a battle.
Yeah. So we had the case in its infancy, Simon told the Post in an exclusive interview. One of the first names that popped for us was James Caban. James Caban was who? Oh, the twin brother of the then police commissioner, Edward Caban. Soon, other big names surfaced. And you know what's funny? When I was reading this, I knew who the names were before I read it, including mayoral advisor Timothy Pearson, and then also known AKA Crumbs, and then deputy mayor of public safety Bill Banks, also known as AKA the unindicted co-conspirator. The two gumshoes went to higher ups at DOIs with their shocking discoveries. When this comes out, you're going to have worlds collapsing, Seidman told his DOI boss, Audrey Feldman. It's going to take the police department down. With the detectives kept the DOI case close to the vest, but frequently felt their NYPD bosses were fishing for information to get ahead of the probe that was about to ensnare top brass and Mayor Adams' closest advisors, they alleged in court papers. So let's talk about that for a second, right? So now we have people in the NYPD working for DOI. Jessica Tisch has just sent some more people there. There were people removed from DOI and sent back to the NYPD. But basically, the NYPD has executives inside of DOI. Huge conflict of interest, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Look, shout out here, Patrick Donahue, great friend to the podcast, says it right here. During the time, Tisch transferred 9 investigators into Department of Investigations to beef up corruption investigation. A detective was transferred out. No doubt about it. You and I both said it when those 9 detectives were transferred into DOI. We said those are 9 spies. So it appears DOI cannot be trusted either. So, even when John and I made our complaint to Internal Affairs about the upper echelon, we didn't make that complaint to DOI. We actually didn't make it and didn't ask for a referral because there was no point. DOI is appointed by Eric Adams. Every reason to believe that we were stonewalled. And you know what's even more reflective? We've seen it this entire year. There were numerous friends and listeners on this podcast that were actually blocked on social media, including John and myself, from various upper echelon members of the police department, including Cass Daughtry and John Schell and Jeffrey Madry. And those complaints were referred to DOI, and DOI said they can't investigate at this time. And for some of those people, they were unblocked, but there was no investigation. They said there would be no investigation at this time. Do you think that's a coincidence? I think not.
So it became clear that Sergeant Vincent Dienes, the direct NYPD supervisor at DOI, was trying to get information to report back to their then commander, Deputy Inspector Raymond Festino. Festino is one of the 5 bosses named in the lawsuit and was in charge of a dozen detectives, including Simon and VDOT at DOI, the suit alleges. Then it switched, Simon recalled. They want us off this case. That's also when the intimidation tactics began in earnest. The gumshoes would show up to work at DOI's Maiden Lane offices in Lower Manhattan and find photos of rats hung near their desk. with their confidential license plate numbers written next to the rodent picture, the suit alleges. Send rats packing, the sanitation advisory message declared. Around this time, the U.S. Attorney's Office joined the mushrooming corruption case, and the detectives were warned by DOI to not share information with other cops. DOI is not sure who is compromised, the lawsuit claims. So here you go. This is my problem with the U.S. Attorney's Office, right? You're relying on DOI. You're relying from the information you're getting from the executives who are compromised because they work for the individuals you're investigating. Their careers, their promotions, their assignment is dictated by the people that they're investigating. Is this not a huge conflict of interest? How did the U.S. attorney even feel comfortable performing this investigation with DOI? Is beyond me. Because like I said, not only does the Internal Affairs Bureau of the NYPD need to be audited and investigated, not transferred, audited and investigated, so does the DOI. And like I said, what I would do is I would go back to those calls that came in and go over all those letters and anything where the name Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, Jeffrey Madry, Tony Kinsella, or any other member, Timothy Pearson, Philip Banks, Eric Adams, every single allegation that came in, James Caban, Ed Caban, any one of those names, Jimmy Rodriguez, any one of those names that came across your desk, they need to be reinvestigated, audited, every single one of those complaints. And what you're going to see if you do that is you're going to see that those allegations did not follow the traditional route of every other investigation, of every other allegation of its nature. And there's going to be no response for it other than DOI and IAB are corrupted. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's not, oh, what do you want me to do? I don't know what I want you to do. But it's a corrupted organization. I don't know what to do. Like I said, sometimes you get too smart and you got to leave. Sometimes having integrity means you have to leave your career. Right? So that's what happens. Sometimes it is what it is. It's like, well, I know you guys are telling. Look what was done to Marlon Bethel. Marlon Bethel said, I have no problem doing what you're telling me to do. I just want to do the one that's FDA authorized, and you don't have it. And then you have the head doctor in the NYPD basically threatening him that he's going to psych him. And then he winds up getting terminated. And guess what? None of you took anything that was FDA authorized. So who's the crazy one? Sometimes you get too smart. And that's it. Your career's over. So I don't know what I want you to do. But if you're going to sit here and defend internal affairs or DOI and tell me that it's not systemically corrupt, like City Hall, like this isn't Tammany Hall revisited, I'm sorry, I'm not there with you at all. Prove me different. Why did those complaints go a different way? These guys are basically saying everything that we've been saying for 2 years. Our complaints have fell on deaf ears and have not went the normal route and course of things. So it's like I said, I don't know the totality of all the merits of their suit, but I know for a fact that there were legitimate allegations made to DOI that went absolutely nowhere. Nobody was ever contacted about them.
Patrick Donahue on fire, another one today. Says these two DOI detectives were investigating PC Caban's brother. But amazingly, the wife, think about that, the wife of one of Caban's security detail detectives worked in NYPD DOI squad. Wow, that's what I'm talking about. Exactly that. If you make a complaint of the upper echelon, you're sandwiched in. Because you have the upper echelon that is probing your case, is probing your complaint, and then you have it from DOI. So you're sandwiched in. So what we said earlier, reflecting on Ron Lason's comment, is spot on. Because not only do you have to worry about the retaliation and what's reflective on the city level, it's how this is going to play out throughout the entire New York State politics. And with this legislation, you are on shit's creek. There's no doubt about it. You're in a world of shit when you make a complaint, as these guys did. So that's exactly, those are the choices, John, what we said earlier. With the system that we have now, which is completely broken, it's end your career or join in. And if you have integrity, you're going to end your career. And if you know what, you're at that point, well, you know what? I got a wife and I got a couple of kids and I got to keep my mouth shut and I need this job. Well, you know what? This just breeds more corruption. You might have to join in yourself because you have nowhere to turn if you want to stay on this job, especially you're unfortunate enough to be, your eyes saw something that they shouldn't have seen, or you're doing your investigation and that investigation leads in a direction that you didn't want to see. And unfortunately, sometimes you can't turn back what you've already seen. So it's a shame. But this is what we see right now, that it's not only on the city level, that it stems throughout the entire state. The system is broken. We need some serious changes. And one of those changes, exactly what we said, we heard it earlier here today from from a comment from one of our friends and listeners, exactly that. We need elected officials. Our police commissioner needs to be elected official. We need more elected officials, not appointments by the mayor, where the mayor has the leverage and holds the cards. This is scary at this point. We need to come up with a system where there's an avenue that actually complaints can be made to the upper echelon. Is the answer a complete outside entity? I would say for a short term, yes, but we need a long-term solution. Do I want a civilian complaint review board, an independent watchdog that eventually could be comprised of those that have a bias and disdain for law enforcement? Absolutely not. But I think in the short term, we do need an outside entity. We need a commission in the short term to come up with a system how we can effectively monitor the police department along with the upper echelon. So could it be retired detectives? That might be something we should look at, that understand the inner linings, that have real perspective, that could identify corruption, but at the same time, there's not leverage on those detectives. Do I want an absolute outside entity for the long term? No, because we see the results in the byproducts for civilian complaint review board, the civilian complaint review board. So unfortunately, the system is broken, and it's because the upper echelon has taken advantage of this system. So for the short time and the short term being, I do believe we need an outside entity. And I can't believe that we still haven't had a commission yet. We need a commission. We've had NAP commission, Milan commission. Clearly, how do we not have a commission right now with this corruption probe that's coming out? Are we going to wait until actually all the corruption exposed? If this takes a couple of years and just allow more corruption to ferment, this is ridiculous. We need a commission, and we need it now.
Well, Jim Walden has actually proposed that if he becomes mayor, if he wins his election, he's going to create a public integrity unit with teeth to investigate these high-level complaints. Now, it falls on its face if the mayor is actually corrupt, right? Now we have a big problem, which kind of looks like the problem we're having currently. But I think the important point to note about DOI and internal affairs is this. We had a police commissioner who put his friends in charge of those units, right? Caban puts his friends. You're going to be in charge of internal affairs. Now, he didn't name whatever his face was, not Kinsilla, whatever her name was. Keechan Sewell appointed the head of internal affairs. However, she didn't know who anybody was. So Eric Adams ultimately appointed her. Eric Adams took heed from Ed Caban. So Ed Caban points his friends in charge of DOI, in charge of NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau. Do we really think? Do you really think they're not going to talk about the cases? Does anyone believe that? Does anyone believe that whatsoever? So, I mean, the system fails on its face. So, yeah, I do think that we need an outside entity. I think that you need an outside entity comprised of law enforcement individuals, not necessarily NYPD guys. Because, honestly, I'm not seeing too much from these NYPD guys. I'm not. I don't see anything like, and like, do you want to get the guys that have a chip on their shoulder? Like, people say that we have a chip on their shoulder. No, not necessarily. You want outside law enforcement agency looking at that. I mean, they do it in Florida all the time. A cop is accused of killing somebody, a sheriff's deputy or something. They bring in another sheriff's office to investigate that crime, so that it's not a conflict of interest, right? And it's tried in a different court and everything else because it's small. And what we're seeing is they made a huge city small. They took the system over. They took it over. Eric Adams' administration controlled the system. So let's go on this report a little bit further. So meanwhile, the abuse from their own bosses began to fester. In September of 22. So think about that. September of 22. That's a long time ago, my friends. Was I still on the job?
No, you retired before. I retired September 22.
I retired February of 22. When did you retire? July
September.
of 22?
September.
So, all right. So Eric's not even on the podcast yet. Eric's still working. September of 22, the two partners attended a line of duty funeral at the request of Squad Commander Festino, was allegedly outraged that they had skipped a going away party for a civilian team member. So this is how long that this corruption's been going on for. It's basically the minute the Adams administration took over. He phoned Vidal, a U.S. Marine who was shot in the line of duty as a cop in 2003, to berate him, the suit claims. You think you can do whatever you want, you mother effers? Festino allegedly shouted. I will effing kill you. I will kick your effing ass. Festino had an ugly history of hateful remarks, the detective claimed. Once, while Seidman, who is Jewish, was helping to decorate the office Christmas tree, Festino walked in the room and allegedly said, "Look at the Jew doing the Christmas tree." The detectives filed an internal and equal employment opportunity complaint claiming discrimination in a hostile work environment, the suit alleged. As the corruption case expanded, Festino became more controlling, allegedly telling them whatever work they did, they moved forward, would be for him and him only, they claimed. The detectives were also told they had to check in every 2 hours when they were in the field and needed special permission to work overtime, costing them thousands, the suit claims. The detectives worried and their shared fears with one of the DOI investigators. So now I know that a lot of people are here seeing this and they're like, oh, these guys are filing OEOs against their bosses. These guys are doing that. These guys are doing this. But what it really is if you think about it now, you're investigating a complaint, you start to be retaliated against. What's your recourse? You have two recourses: retire right away, if you're even allowed to, because now you're under investigation, or attempt to fight back. What's your fight back? You have to file OEO complaints. Why? Because what are we always told as cops? You file an OEO complaint, you can't be retaliated against. But what we've come to learn through this podcast is actually the retaliation will more likely get worse. So I'm not gonna knock them for filing the OEO complaints against their boss, because if he's coming at you and trying to take your job, you have to protect yourself.
There's no doubt about it. Now, listen, I'm not a tough guy, but I tell you right now, if somebody would have said that to me, I would have rearranged his teeth in the parking lot. He would have needed a visit at the dentist. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've never made an OEO complaint while I was on the job, or an internal affairs complaint, but I would never tolerate some anti-Semitic comments from my boss. That's absolutely ridiculous. But again, it's exactly what you said, John. They're in a position where they're boxed in. You know, I was never in that position, fortunate, where I had to make an OEO or an internal affairs complaint. But at the same token, I can completely understand. At this point, they've made this investigation. They've now been retaliated against. What do they have at this point? And these guys have to protect their careers. And unfortunately, the only weapon they have at that point, or any layer of protection, the only shield that they have is OEO. And even with that, OEO is in bed with the enemy also. So that's going to go nowhere. But at least they have the documentation for a potential lawsuit to protect themselves, because these guys know they've already faced career suicide. VDOT had to retire, and Simon has 36 months left in this battle. So they have no choice. So who can fault them? That's absolutely ridiculous. Now, listen, I don't believe in, that you have to resort to violence, but you shouldn't be saying those kind of things to somebody. And I'm not surprised. If I heard it a long time ago, but with this administration right now, I'm not surprised that they would say things like that, especially with all this anti-Semitism that's going on right now. That I don't stand for.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got about 922 people on here this morning. Thanks for joining. We're talking about two detectives, NYPD detectives, who were working at DOI, who were retaliated against for investigating corruption. If you guys could do us a favor, like, share, subscribe, we appreciate it. Let's go a little further into this. All right. The detectives were also told, the detectives were worried and shared their fears with one of the DOI investigators. I'm telling you right now, the retaliation's going to be through the roof, Seidman said. He told the DOI. When this comes out, I'm done. And I called it. In 2023, both detectives were taken off the corruption case and transferred to other units. First to the Real-Time Crime Center at police headquarters, and then the city's Office of Emergency Management in Brooklyn. The new assignment stuck Simon, who has 4 kids with 2-hour commute, an NYPD retaliation tactic known as highway therapy. VDOT decided to retire and now drives a school bus part-time. It's been rough, VDOT said. I feel bad that I left and Will's still there, but I couldn't take it anymore. They were coming after me. I said I better leave while I can. Seidman, a 17-year veteran of the force, had been languishing at a city shelter in the East Village as an OEM security officer and was recently told he's being transferred to the subways. Attorney John Scola, who filed the lawsuit, said the department needs true independent oversight to root out corruption. So, we were talking about that, and I agree. CCRB, honestly, is a defunct agency. They actually have absolutely no teeth. They've been heavily politicized. They go after the people who they should be protecting, and they protect the people that they should be going after. So in my opinion, defund the CCRB. I'm totally for it. And let's use that money to create this public integrity unit. They have enough people working in IAB. They could handle the CCRB complaints, or get some outside, or hire civilians to handle it. Or have this new public integrity unit run it. But the CCRB is completely defuncted. What do you think about that, Eric? You support defund the CCRB? Have you seen anything good come out of them?
Listen, I've been saying this for a long time. I was saying that CCRB needs to be revamped. I don't think, listen, even being the most complained cop, I don't think that we need to get rid of CCRB altogether. I think that we need a fine working CCRB. It needs to be comprised of retired cops that have a real perspective of police work, right? Because we do want our cops to be professional. We do want a good bedside manner for cops. We don't want cops going out there and using improper force and mistreating the public, even when it comes to perpetrators, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. You want professionalism. But the way that CCRB is utilized right now, it's comprised of people that are biased and disdain, and that's why these investigations are not properly done and they're not thorough. So, do we need CCRB? Yes, we need to be held accountable, but not in the manner that's run now, and not as an independent watchdog. It needs to be more intertwined and weaved with the police department. But again, like I think, maybe with retired guys as such that have a real perspective, so that we have a good bedside manner. But we don't need overlap either. If we have an effective working internal affairs bureau that can actually investigate force cases, that's where I think we have the problem. So could they be in the same unit, and CCR be an entity of internal affairs, and internal affairs ultimately be an outside entity that is working by retired members of the service? That could be something, because when it comes to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, we see a lot of overlap, right? We saw it in the Trawick, the Trawick case, right? The Kawasaki Trawick case, right? Where 2 police officers had to shoot an armed subject with a knife, right? It's tragic. It's horrific. But in that case, we see a lot of overlap where they're cleared by internal affairs, and then the Civilian Complaint Review Board is still taking action. So that's where I see it's a problem, right? Because you have what's investigated by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. You have FATO, which is an acronym: force of abuse, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. So if Internal Affairs is already investigating the force, and then for it then to be dropped down in oversight by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that's where I see a problem. And it's almost as if we're doing double dipping. So I think if the Internal Affairs investigates anything that has to do with those 4 categories, I think the Civilian Complaint Review Board should have no intervention or interjection. So that's my thoughts on that. If that makes any sense, we would need more time to actually be thorough on it, to spend more time on it. But yeah, that's where I think the Civilian Complaint Review. What's that?
I said it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to you? No. But hear what I'm saying. I think that the Civilian Complaint Review Board needs to be intertwined with Internal Affairs, not its own independent watchdog. And what I'm saying is, let's say, for instance, a force case like the Kawasaki trial case. In that case, Internal Affairs did their investigation, and those 2 cops were cleared. They did their job. It's unfortunate, it's tragic. But for then the Civilian Complaint Review Board to do an investigation, I believe is overlap. It's double dipping. It's unnecessary. In that case, I don't think the Civilian Complaint Review Board should have an investigation in that case. That's my point to it. You understand this?
I just think it's a huge. I think it's hundreds of millions of dollars out of New York City budget. I think we just get rid of it. It doesn't even make sense. It's not even an effective agency. So let's start. Like, that's a great point. The Kawasaki trailer case. What did CCRB do? Absolutely nothing. They're trying to redo a criminal investigation that was already done, that they found no criminality, right? That was already ran by the district attorney's office. So the CCRB is spending all this time and money and employing all these people to investigate something that was already investigated. So they have absolutely useless to be there. Then when you take into account the things that they should be investigating, like someone who's having convulsions on the floor with 2 cops on top of them, and someone comes over and curb stomps their head, and they do absolutely nothing for it. Why is that? Like, take those 2 cases, for example. Those are the most 2 egregious things that the CCRB has been involved in, and they've absolutely dropped the ball on both of them. They're absolutely useless. Save the money. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. The investigators are biased. They're politicized. They go after people they shouldn't go after. And the people that they should go after, they've been, for whatever reason, maybe they want more funding from the mayor, or the NYPD has something that they dangle over their head, they don't go after. So I think this defund the CCRB. If I were the mayor, I'm getting rid of the CCRB, 100%.
Well, John, we're actually saying the same thing, right? So maybe let me clarify here. I'm saying that we do not need an actual outside entity of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Yes, so in that essence, we could say defund the CCRB. What I'm saying is it could be a unit or a component part of the Internal Affairs Bureau. So dollars for dollars, we would save a lot of money. We wouldn't have this overlap, because this overlap and this double dipping of investigations costs a lot of money. It's absolutely ridiculous. You're a police officer and you take action in an arrest situation, rhetorically speaking, whatever the arrest is, and you can be investigated by Internal Affairs. You have to take your time out to actually go to these investigations and be interrogated. And then to do it by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, that's happening twice. So every time that cop has to go for that interrogation, we're losing that cop from working on the street in the field. So that's why I say it could be a component and a unit part of the Internal Affairs Bureau, which ultimately I think the Internal Affairs Bureau should be its own entity at some point, comprised of retired members of the service with a perspective of the police department, but where the upper echelon does not have leverage on them. So I think we're saying the same thing to defund the CCRB as a whole. It should not be an outside entity. It needs to come back to the police department, and it needs to be comprised of a police perspective. So I guess we agree, because dollars for dollars, it's just the cost is astronomical, and it doesn't make sense in the Kawasaki trial case that the Civilian Complaint Review Board is actually involved at any point. I think it's overstepping. It's not in their purview. You need a lot more experience to understand police work, especially when you have 2 police officers that had to fire a weapon, a firearm, at someone in possession of a knife. To have an outside entity, a civilian source, to make a perspective and never had been in that position to really understand it, it's absolutely ridiculous. Complete overlap. And the amount of money you're saying, we're talking about millions, is absolutely a waste of cost and waste of taxpayer money.
And obviously the same is true for the Internal Affairs Bureau, and that's what we're seeing here. I mean, maybe they've done some good documentation and there's some good aspects about the Internal Affairs Bureau, and you need some type of just based upon the amount of complaints alone. You need some type of administrative process to put that through. But again, we're seeing that the whole system's been hijacked. The whole system. And then when it's at a higher level and things go to DOI's actually been hijacked as well. So I'm supporting this public integrity unit. And how are we getting the funds for it? Very simple. There's three defunct agencies that I see here that do absolutely nothing. The NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau, the DOI. I don't want to say Internal Affairs Bureau does absolutely nothing. They do good things on lower down cases, but they're toothless when it comes to severe and real allegations. And most of the real allegations winds up coming from the feds anyway. And, they do some good administrative documentation. So to me, defund the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau, take their budget, take the DOI's budget, take the CCRB's budget, create this public integrity unit, and you could take a mix of the top performers and all of that thing to come up. And unfortunately, I think what that's going to lead to is ultimately everyone that's outside of IAB is going to eventually be weeded out shortly. Anyone that was inside of this internal process is there just to set up the process. And then as the cases are coming in, they have no part in it. They don't know the allegations. They're not investigating the cases. They're just working on the process because it's been hijacked. You can't trust anybody.
That's the key element right there, John. That's the key element. You can't trust anybody. So I think that back to what I was saying, it's a lot of information, but this is the bottom line because there is a lot of information. I think the public integrity unit, it's a good idea, but I think we need to start out with a commission. Before the public integrity unit actually commences, we need a commission first. We need to iron out all this aspects of corruption that we've exposed with this administration to start on a fresh start. Now, I'm saying with this public integrity unit, there could be a component of it, a component that is the civilian complaints, whatever you want to call it. It could be the civilian complaint review board. It could be the same thing, but it's not an outside entity. This idea of an outside entity for civilian complaint review board and this overlapping costs millions of dollars, a waste of time, to waste of money, to waste of investigators. And we could just completely consolidate with this public integrity unit. And again, I think we really should seek out retired members of the service, detectives, or maybe even, it could be police officers, that just had a great eye for police work, and to be part of this integrity unit, to oversee and get real perspective. And yet the upper echelon does not have a direct line and doesn't have any leverage on them. They're getting paid by the pension fund. That's a whole different avenue. I think that's a great start. But I want to see a commission first. I think we need a commission first, and then we can get started and we can get this thing on the road. So, shout out to Jim Walden for actually putting his fingerprint out there and his footprint to actually make some real changes. That would be a real change. It's a step in the right direction. Of course, we don't have elected officials at this point, which would be another huge hurdle, which would be a great obstacle to overcome. And but I think we can get there. We can, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, but there can be some real changes in it. I feel sorry for these detectives. Clearly, these aren't any slouches. These two have hell of careers. I mean, I think it's VDOT was involved in a shooting in 2003. I'm sure at some point was a hero on this job, but it shows you how fast they turn their back on you, right? I felt it. They used to call me Captain America, and they turned their back on me in a second, and that's what they do. So I feel sorry for them because they were doing their job. They were doing it appropriately, and they were investigating the upper echelon, and there is a vast amount of corruption right now. And everyone at this point should not have a tolerance or a threshold for corruption, especially when it's so blatant in the public eye, and especially when it's the upper echelon, because it holds the cost of this job, and that is the job. The job is the upper echelon.
Yeah, so let's go to the end of this article now. Attorney John Scola filed a lawsuit, said the department needs true independent oversight to root out corruption. Hardworking detectives like Simon and VDOT, who stood against corrupt superiors, have been their careers destroyed in retaliation. Proof that without real reform, justice within the department is an illusion, Scola said. There have been no criminal charges in the case the pair was investigating, but Philip Banks and Pearson both resigned amid the federal investigation. The probe is one of the many swirling around Mayor Adams' troubled administration, which saw multiple raids, subpoenas, and resignations this year and last. City's Department of Education was served with subpoena as part of a federal probe into outgoing schools chancellor David Banks and his brother Terrence Banks, a consultant who represented the companies that scored lucrative contracts from the cities, as source told the Bulls. Both of the brothers of Philip Banks. Adams was named in a 5-count criminal indictment on September 24, alleging he took bribes, Turkish interest in exchange for official favors. He pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence, pushing hard against claims that he was about to step down. So, I mean, again, we're here. We told you that there is not an outlet to properly investigate. And honestly, I don't even see a commission being necessary at this point, because who are you getting to man this commission? You're going to put Ray Kelly there? You're going to put Bill Bratton there? Who's manning this commission in New York City? It needs a complete overhaul mayoral administration. Honestly, this public integrity unit is another thing. Who's going to man that as well? Because what has happened is all of the previous predecessors of the department have aligned themselves with this administration. So who's actually, and what we're seeing is a complete deflection and this PR campaign to build up the work that Jessica Tisch has done. And honestly, she hasn't done anything to root it out. All we're seeing is people retiring before investigations come down, and we're seeing deals being worked out with the Justice Department. You're seeing all of the same unindicted co-conspirators trying to remain unindicted co-conspirators in different cases. And honestly, the system is corrupted. New York City is systemically corrupt. The NYPD from the top is systemically corrupt. And now what we're doing is we're trying to run a PR campaign to clean it up. And I just don't see it. I'm sorry. Like, I don't see who's wrong. Who are we going to sit on the board in that commission? John Schell? Kaz Daughtry? Because if we run a commission, that's who's sitting on that board. It's going to be Bill Bratton, Kaz Daughtry, John Schell. That's who's going to be there. And it's like, no, absolutely not. Put a unit together that has some teeth and start investigating, because we're past it. It's like the corruption is the difference between the commissions in the past and now is that the difference that's in the corruption in the past and now. The corruption in the past was lower down corruption that came from rank and file members in certain particular commands, and they were corrupt. But the upper echelon of the NYPD, the mayor, while they had their own issues and things like that, they were made up of integrity and wanted to do the right thing. Today, it's completely reversed. It's completely reversed.
Listen, you're bringing up some valid points. I agree with you in the sense that who's going to man it, but I still think I have to push back and say that we still need a commission just to have all this information documented, and we need transcript of it. That's what we need. And you're right, because it's not going to do anything. But at this point, maybe we could actually have an outside entity actually do this commission, or maybe we just wait till the next mayoral administration and just have a whole new overhaul of upper echelon of police department, and then we could actually do the commission. But I do think we need it just to get all the information out and have a transcript of it. Diane Bond says, this corruption in New York City is insane. Will we ever bounce back? Looking back at Officer Serpico, and this is still going on. That's a good point. Will we bounce back? And I don't know about bouncing back, but I think we need to move forward. And we need to move forward from what happened with Serpico in the days going forward. Because one thing Serpico is right about is there's really no avenue of corruption. And when he said that, I don't think he was actually referring to the upper echelon, because the corruption that he experienced was with the rank and file. But when we talk about the upper echelon, right, because Serpico did have an avenue of people he could trust that were of higher rank. But when we talk about the upper echelon, that's really what's scary about this, John, is that the upper echelon holds the cards. And I have to be honest, I don't want to give, when it comes to your house, I wouldn't want to give away my house. Rhetorically speaking, I don't give away my house for someone else to watch over. I want to watch over my house. But unfortunately, in the short term, we do need someone else to watch it until we figure out that long-term solution. I think the idea of the public integrity unit is great. Could it be a long-time solution? Yes. If it's retired members of service that worked for the NYPD, or you had said earlier, not even the NYPD, just law enforcement, that could be an aspect of it. or people that have a law degree and criminal justice degree. We can have a good component of both, but we definitely need police perspective. We need people that did, real intrusive police work to understand. But again, going back to these two detectives, to call them rats, I think is ridiculous. I mean, they're reporting corruption. They're reporting crimes. They're not reporting White Sox. They're not reporting, some stuff at a low level. They're reporting legitimate corruption, and which can actually stem through and hurt the rank and file. So if anything, what they're doing is they're protecting the rank and file, and they're fighting for every cop right now that's being damaged by this embarrassing upper echelon that's really just deteriorated this department. So Diane Barnes, and shout out to you. Can we bounce back? I think we can move forward by having these discussions. We need to come up with new units, right? Defund CCRB as an outside entity, bring a component of that to internal affairs, but then take internal affairs to the public integrity unit, have it as an outside unit with retired members of service. Now we have everything in one bag. We're saving money. We don't have an injection by the upper echelon of the police department. And so the question is, though, in that case, if we do have police officers that are going to report corruption at the upper echelon with this a public integrity unit, what would be their avenue? How can we assure that complaint would be protected? And how do we make sure that it's not released to the NYPD? That would be my only concern. And I think we could come up with some definite solutions.
Yeah, my solution is that nobody that works for the NYPD is going to be a part of that thing. It's that simple. You can't investigate someone that's in charge of your promotions, that's in charge of your pay, that's in charge of your assignment. You can't. It's a conflict of interest. Eric's my boss, but I have to investigate him. Guess what? I'm biased. Whether you think you're biased or not, you're biased. Oh, and Eric has the ability to transfer you, and Eric does your evaluations. Oh, but you want me to investigate Eric? Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's what's going on. That's the system that's in place. In past, it worked because the corruption was at the lower down levels. That's why it worked. Let's listen to Frank Serpico. This is coming by way of Doug Papa podcast. Doug's a good guy. Check him out. Mike Freed actually sent an article, but listen to what Serpico's got to say.
He informed me about the pad.
Now, the pad, what is a pad? How do you define it?
Pad is a systemized pickup of monies from gamblers in order to give them immunity from arrest.
We must create an atmosphere in which the dishonest officer fears the honest one and not the other way around. I hope that this investigation and any future ones will deal with corruption at all levels within the department and not limit themselves to cases involving individual patrolmen.
You heard that?
For 5 years.
You heard what he said? We have to create a system where the dishonest cops fear the honest ones and not the other way around. But what we've done in New York City is create a system where the honest cops fear the dishonest cops, where the honest cops fear the dishonest mayor and his cronies. That's what we've done, right? And what did he say? We have to create a system that not only goes after those cops, doesn't stop just at those cops, it works its way up to the top. That's what he was saying. And that was his last line in there. His last line was saying, don't stop with those cops.
Yeah, it's well said. It's well said. But unfortunately, as I said, we've gotten to a point where it's much worse right now than Serpico times. What Serpico went through is horrific. His life, unfortunately, was almost lost, but he strived through it. But what Serpico went through was at the level of rank and file. But what we're talking about here is the upper echelon, and this could be far worse. We haven't seen any, thank God we haven't seen any anything tragic or horrific actually stem from this upper echelon. But could it get to that point? We don't know. And I don't want to see it get to that point. So, Patch Donnie, listen, you make a great point here. He says, let's be realistic. If the city created an investigative unit like Eric is describing, it would be filled with nepotism and eyes and ears. I think it's a great point, right? That's what we're talking about, is trying to alleviate this nepotism we have at the upper echelon, which is special treatment for family, for friends, this deity of service of nepotism. So you make a great point, and that's why I think with retired members, if we could really weed out a lot of that nepotism. Will there always be a form of nepotism in any organization? Sure. It's not something I think you could actually get to a zero tolerance. It's you try to minimize as much as possible. But I think with retired members, there's not much for them to lose or gain. So I think that would be the benefit there. But I think you make up a great point. There's no doubt about it. But again, when we talk about the Serpico case, we're talking about rank and file. We're not talking about the upper echelon. And so it's far worse. This is far more egregious if you look at it. I think that if this corruption probe actually unveils itself and we have the amount of corruption that we believe we have, that this unscrupulous behavior actually comes out and actually is true. Especially when we talk about Ed Caban, former police commissioner, what's going on with his brother. If all this stuff gets unveiled, and if there's actually a prostitution ring for overtime, if there's actually a pay for play when it comes to promotions, if all the stuff comes out, this is far worse than Serpico. This is far worse than his case. This is by the people that hold the case, that hold the cards. This is the job.
Yeah, so listen to what Serpico said. He says 10% of cops in New York City, mind you, this is the 70s people, so I'll say 10% of the upper echelon. Probably I'll actually say like 35% of the upper echelon, excuse me. More than that, actually. More than that. 2 stars and above all of them. 99.9%. 10% of the cops in New York City are absolutely corrupt. 10% are absolutely honest. And the other 80%, they wish they were honest. Whistleblowing NYPD officer Frank Serpico famously charged when he alleged widespread corruption in the NYPD in 1970. Crooked cops fall into 2 categories: meat eaters and grass eaters. New York City's NAP Commission report on police corruption found when it confirmed Serpico's allegations 2 years later in 1972. Meat eaters aggressively exploit their official power for personal profit. So the Adams administration is filled with meat eaters. So if you got any meat on your bones, they're chewing you alive, right? Grass eaters simply accept the payoffs that happenstances of police work throw their way. Meat eaters get front page headlines if caught, but only represent a small percentage of all corrupt policemen. Grass eaters are the malignant heart of the problem, the NAP Commission concluded. Their great numbers tend to make the corruption respectable. So, again, goes back to the cowardice, right? It goes back to the cowardice for me. It goes back to it because who are ultimately the grass eaters? You see the corruption. You say nothing. You maybe even, I guess I got to sign her OT slip, because she was in the office for a while. I guess it's all right that his wife has a Craylo car. I guess it's all right that I'm driving his kids to school. I guess it's all right that I'm driving him to Atlantic City. I guess it's all right that I'm driving him skiing. I guess it's all right that we're flying these people out to the Hamptons. I guess it's all right that I'm taking straw donations for the mayor. You're a grass eater. You're a coward. You're corrupt. And that's what he's saying. And that's what Serpico is saying. And these numbers, honestly, 1970, 2025, probably worse today. Probably worse.
Well, John, they should actually ring in your ears, because to me, what he's saying is ultimately so reflective of the mandate. And a good majority of those that succumb to the mandate are grass eating, right? Like, I have to take this to continue my career. I really can't ask too many questions about it because I have to continue on my career. So I think the mandate is the most reflective of what Serpico is saying. He's right. There's a lot of people, like you said, they're going to say, well, I guess there's no harm in Ed Caban's brother former commissioner having a security detail. You know, if Ed Gaban thinks it's okay, if the upper echelon thinks it's okay, who am I to say it's not okay? So you know, it's a tough time. You know, it's a tough time to be a cop in this upper echelon. And I speak to cops all the time. I said, you know, wow, you know, we talk about in the podcast, is the job running on autopilot, or are you guys still getting a lot of pressure out there? Like, no, we're getting more pressure now than ever. With all this corruption going on the top, they want to pretend like everything's running smoothly by deflecting and putting all the pressure at the bottom. I mean, these ICOs right now, your technical control officers in the precincts, they're going through hell. They're going through constant meetings. They're pressured for every piece of overtime as if they're responsible for this abuse and excessive overtime that was stolen taxpayer money. And yet it's the ICOs that are paying for it. Cops in these precincts right now, in busy precincts, are working so hard right now, and they're being pressed for an hour overtime. Yeah, listen, it's go along to get along, John. That's really what it is. There's only some that stand apart. You know, I've heard in the past, I'm trying to find the literature on it. I can't find it. But apparently only 2% of a population speak out from a group. So it's actually less than the numbers that Serpico says. 2% that actually speak out from a group. It's much easier for people to actually make mistakes and do what's wrong, to stick with the group, and actually do what's right and to come out on top. It's unfortunate, but we see it. And that's how the Nazi Party started. And the bottom line, you know, growing up, you know, young Jewish man, I always ask myself, could it happen again? There's no doubt about it. It could happen. And you know what? Maybe it will.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell the truth. You can't ask questions. You can't, you know, and that's the man. To me, the mandate, you know, I go back to it always because, you know, a lot of people were like, what was your biggest disappointment in 2020? And I'm like, men failed thoroughly. I thought that my problem is I had a strong, dominant, masculine figure as a father. It was my blessing, but it was also, I just was like, oh yeah, this is how men are. Men are like my father. And what I came to find out is that he's actually a rarity. Maybe not at the time when he was alive, but today, yeah. And then when people are giving me these statistics about male testosterone, and they're like, you have like 50%, you only have like 50% of the testosterone that your father had. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could see that totally. You know, because, you know, and when I look at like men like him, really had no friends. I mean, but people liked him. People respected my father because he told you what he thought. But however, and he didn't like, I framed things so much nicer than my father ever did. My father couldn't frame anything. He told you what he thought. You know, he said, and you're like, what the, you know, like, oh my God, like, how can you do that? Like, you know, it's just how he was. But like, you know, ultimately, you know, I was on the call with a bunch of pastors last night, and someone was like, "Oh, describe manhood to me." I was like, "You want me to describe manhood to you? I'll describe manhood." I said, "Manhood is staying and doing the things that I know that are right." And unfortunately, in the church today, and in law enforcement today, and in society today, we've been completely emasculated. Because men don't say what they think, and they don't do what they know is right. And you know, silence, you know. And I'm like, well, you know, people ask me these questions. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to give you the real answer of it. The real answer is that being a man is a very hard thing, and not a lot of people who are born as men can hold up to that standard, because that's what you're supposed to do. They're like, we're men of God. Okay, we're men of God. Why did my church shut me out 2 years ago? Why did my church tell me that the utmost important thing is telling the truth? But yet they wanted me to lie. Why did my church deny my faith? Why did my church deny that my conscience is me speaking to God? Why did all of the things that I was taught and I believe my entire life, did you turn your back on for political gain, ultimately for financial gain? Because it was the church too. It wasn't just people in law enforcement. You know, when I talk about the mandate, it's just my perspective because it's where it happened to me. But overall, I see it in every function of society. And why I see that was able to happen was because of the lack of masculinity. Now, was my father polished? No, but he was a man. I made a video when I first got down to Florida, and I was literally sitting in the parking lot with tears in my eyes. I heard kids playing. They were running around free with no masks on. And I'm like, why is it okay here? But I had to leave where I'm from for my kids to breathe air and play in the schoolyard. Why? Why do I have to do that? And so I made a video, and I was like, I didn't show any of the kids because I wouldn't do that, but I just let everyone listen to the sound of kids playing because I hadn't heard it in 2 years. Because New York City is filled with a bunch of cowards. I hadn't heard it. Now my kids played, and my kids played with my friends' kids because my kids don't even know what happened during the man. They just know they didn't go to school. They lived a normal life. We went everywhere. We did everything. I didn't listen to Governor Cuomo. I didn't listen to Bill de Blasio. I didn't listen to Eric Adams. My kids lived a normal life, as normal as I could make it for them. You know, and I played that video, and then I just instantly, my phone's blowing up. Take that down. What do you want me to do? I'm like, I want you to do what your father would have done. I want you to do what my father would have did. What's that? Pull your kids out of school and say, I'm not taking them. Same way I did. They're not going. That's it. Be a man, be a father. That's what I want you to do. You know, don't call me and tell me to take it down because you're hurt. The truth sucks. And like, that's ultimately manhood to me. And that's integrity. And what we're seeing in the police department is there's no integrity. People aren't saying what they see, and they're not calling it out. And the good cops are afraid of the bad cops.
I'm glad you said that, John. I agree. You know, I think that being a man is actually saying the truth. You know, and part of it, let me just even go back and say this. I always say this. Being a man is not easy. It's much easier to be a coward, but to be a man, it's not easy. It's not an easy road to be a man. Because to be a man, you have to build yourself. You have to go out and get a good job. You have to work hard to protect your family. That's what a man does. You protect your family. You provide for your family. That's what a good man does. And a good man also speaks the truth. There's a difference between a nice man and being a good man. You can be nice and be good. But you in order to be good, and I'm sorry, in order to be nice, I say you have to be good first. Because if you're not a good man and you're just being nice, you're being nice because you're weak. When you're a good man, you're nice to people because you choose to be nice, because you have strength behind it. And I believe that there's a difference. And we see that in the police department. We say it all the time, the nice guy syndrome. The police department is full of nice guys, but they lie. They tell people, you know, oh, they're great, or they agree with things that they don't agree with to be nice. But that's not being good. And I think that's what people are shocked by when we start this podcast. Is we're saying, excuse me, we're saying a lot of things where we get a lot of hate from it, and it doesn't come off as nice. But to me, it comes off as good because we're saying what's necessary. We're saying what's right. And some people don't like it. They want to hear those nice things. And I don't agree with doing that. You know, John and I personally, we have a lot of conversations, you know, offline where we talk and where we agree and disagree. And sometimes, you know what? You can say the conversations don't sound so nice, right? Well, I don't agree with that. You don't, and that's okay, but we're being honest with each other. And that's what good men do. You know what? To just be nice, to me, is phony. It's weak. You're lying to yourself. You know, if you say, oh, you know, and that's why sometimes we fail when it comes to supervision. Someone comes to work, oh, yeah, you know, and the person's late. It's okay. It's no problem. You know, no. Listen, I have a problem that you're late to work every day. I used to work, John, you probably work with bosses just like that. I used to work with some fellow bosses, and they would come and say, oh, this guy pisses me off. He's late every day. Well, did you tell him? No. Well, then why are you telling me? You didn't tell the cop that you have a problem that he's late every day, and you're not saying a word, and you know, and you're complaining about it, and then you're nice to his face. Well, you know what? To me, that's a weakness. Why don't you tell him the truth? Sit him down and say, you know what? I got a problem that you're late here every day. And not only that, your weakness is losing the rest of the platoon because you're afraid to tell him that it's a problem that he's late. So why would everyone else listen? Why would everyone else fall in line? But again, that's a weakness. That's not being good. So being good to me is having strength and have a moral character.
Yeah. I mean, and that ultimately avoids corruption in the New York City Police Department. Our bad asked a question. What do you say? He said, "Good morning, lieutenants. In your opinion, are things now worse at the NYPD than in the Serpico days? With the exceptions of a few isolated examples, it truly appears that the entire city is corrupt." Well, I think that we already labeled it out, our bad. The difference between Serpico was that it was, although corruption was systemic, it was at the lower down ranks in certain select precincts where corruption was being held. If you guys haven't listened to the podcast already, it was about the Dirty 30. It's called The Set. It's like a 6-part series podcast. You have to listen to it because I couldn't stop listening to it. I was like I was like every second that I could get for free, I was like running away. My wife's like, "Where you going?" I'm like, "I'll be right back." I had to listen to this podcast because it was insane to listen to these guys who were involved in this corruption scheme and what they was like. They were all trying to deflect. It's like, I put in for a transfer because I knew that everything that was going on there was wrong, so I didn't want to be a part of it. But that transfer never came through, so then I had to be a part of it. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, you're really weren't a bad guy, and you really weren't a corrupt guy. You were a coward. And ultimately, you were led around by your tail. And you just did what everybody else was doing. And now you want sympathy for it. And it's like, nah, I don't feel bad for you. But listen to that. Listen to The Set. It's like a 6-part series. I honestly, they should make a movie out of it. It was so well produced. It was unbelievable. I could listen. I could hear it in my head right now. It was a really, really great thing. And honestly, Arbed, to answer your question, I think that things are much worse now. And I don't think it's much worse with the rank and file. I think it's systemically corrupt from the top. If I had to pick a system that's easier to fix, it's going to be the system that Serpico, the corrupt system that Serpico was in, as opposed to the system that we're in today. This is a very complex issue, what's happening today. It's systemically corrupt from the city hall to the upper echelon of the NYPD. Systemically corrupt.
Shout out to our band. We appreciate the coffee and donuts, and it's a great question. And I think we laid it out here, but I want to use an analogy for this. To me, it's almost like having cancer, God forbid. But to me, the days of Serpico, it's like having encapsulated cancer. You could surgically remove it, and it doesn't spread to the rest of the department. But when you have the upper echelon having a corruption probe, to me, it's a cancer that spread through the whole body. And at this point, it's unfortunately, and it's dying within. And I think we need to start over. And I think, like John said, talking about the public integrity unit, is that the exact model? No, but not necessarily. I mean, we have to explore it more. But the idea of it, I think, is a step in the right direction. We absolutely need an overhaul in the upper management. We need some, no doubt about it, I've been saying this for years, we need some real leadership training, to understand the difference between being good and nice. Don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be nice to people. I always believe that you should show respect to everyone. And I show respect to people I don't even like. I don't have to respect them, but I will show them respect and be professional. I don't see why, because otherwise I feel that if I'm being a jerk, that shows an insecurity on myself. So why not be respectful to them? I can't control how someone else behaves. If they want to act unprofessional, like the upper echelon of the police department, you know what? That's their fault, but I can still control who I am. And that's why Ron Layson, shout out to you. I think this is a great point, and it comes down to leadership. You can be good and nice, but not necessarily nice and good. He says, same with evaluations. Don't say anything all year, then give a poor evaluation. I always hated that when doing appeals. Poor leadership. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. If you're afraid to say those tough things to someone because you're afraid to hurt their feelings, are you really hurting their feelings, or are you afraid to, you're not. You're actually helping them, because if someone is making a mistake or an error all year long and you never say a word, how do they know they're making a mistake? How could they actually show an improvement? And then at the end of the year, you hit them with a bad evaluation. Of course they're going to appeal. You never said anything to me the entire year. You were smiling at my face. Why didn't you tell me? You have to tell people and then give them a chance for improvement. So you're absolutely wrong. You're absolutely right, Ron Layson, and that's about real leadership. But there's no leadership training in the NYPD. You either learn, you're lucky enough to have a good mentor, You learn by proxy, or maybe you had some leadership experience outside the NYPD. But to actually learn NYPD, to actually learn leadership, there's no avenue for it. The BMOC, the transition from cop to sergeant, which is your basic module officer course, doesn't have any leadership training. It's just seminars. So we need actually, I tell you right now, if I was commissioner today, I would remove the seminars that we have right now. I would do a 3-day leadership course, maybe at West Point or somewhere else where we could, or maybe some managerial course, a 3-day leadership course, and go right to a command. They would, first of all, it would save thousands of dollars, taxpayer money. You're getting 3 days of leadership training, and all the seminars could be done throughout the year at different training times, and you would actually be at the command learning. 3 days of leadership. That's all you need.
So you don't need all of the lectures that you don't listen to for a month? So Ahmed says, sorry, I should have clarified. So Ahmed says, sorry, I should have clarified. I meant among the lower ranks. So the lower ranks, no. I think that the systems that were put in place, particularly after the Serpico era, actually have alleviated the lower rank down file from being systemically corrupt. Chief Lukash, retired Chief Rob Lukash, says, I knew a sergeant in the 30 during the 30-30 scandal that scratched cops every day out on patrol. They didn't do anything while she was working for fear they would get caught. Goes to a strong boss, right? I worked in the 6-6 during the right after the corruption scandal broke. I had just left. I just gone. And I wasn't there any longer. But there was a guy directly involved in that corruption scandal, Jeremy Diamond, Jeremy Reichberg. I don't think he served jail. He might be out. He might be listening to this right now. But when I first got assigned to the 6-6, I noticed the mayor was at his house, the police commissioner was at his house, the chief of department was at his house, and there were these weaker bosses that would all surround themselves with this guy. So one day he rolls up on me in my driver, and he's like, oh, do you know me? I'm friends with this one. He's throwing out all the names. I'm Phil Banks, this guy, that guy. I was like, yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, nice guy, Espo was still the chief of department at the time. And then he's like telling me all the names. I was like, well, what about state police? You got any connections there? And he's like, no. I was like, what about the FBI? You know anybody there? And he's like, no. I was like, oh, okay. And I like blew him off because he's like trying to like throw names out to intimidate me, to like show me who he is. There it goes right there. So, and what you would see is sergeants kiss this guy's ass every day. Now, full disclosure, I like Jeremy. I thought he was a decent guy, but you're not going to tell me what to do. You're not my boss. You don't work for the New York City Police Department. If you want to call my boss and complain about me, go right ahead. And that's how I treated him. And guess what happened? When that scandal broke out, I never got a knock at my door. I was never worried. Well, people were freaking out on my command. I wasn't worried about what was on my phone, right? Because the thing was, you're either going to stand up or you're not. You're either going to stand on your own 2 feet or you're going to get drugged around, and the same thing for that sergeant. Look, she's in the dirty 30. And when she works, nothing's going on. Right. And I think there was another scandal that broke out, the Buddy Boys. And what they would do is they would go over the radio, hey, buddy. And that was a signal that they were doing something dirty. If they had a strong sergeant working that day, that's not happening because you're controlling that radio. You're going to be like, hey, buddy, what? Hey, buddy, where you going? Hey, buddy, what are you doing? It's not happening. And I told the story like a while ago about the Abdul Louima incident. If there was a strong sergeant on the desk, that incident never happens because all he says to Volpe is, you're not going nowhere. Get away from him and put him in the cell. Bring him right back in front of the desk right now. That's it. So it's integrity. Sometimes it's a hard thing. Sometimes it's really not that hard. The way that Shea broke that incident down for me in BMOC, by the way, even though, so we just bashed it, but I heard that story in BMOC. I'll never forget that story. It makes perfect sense. And every supervisor on this job should hear that story.
What helped me out a lot like you talk about fathers, right? So my father was a huge mentor for me, but my father, he always told me, and it helped me out a lot. He said, listen, what's the best boss? I'll never forget. He's always telling me that. I don't know. He said a dead one. I go, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? He goes, listen, no matter what, they can love you. You can do everything right, everything the guys love every day. The one day you do something that goes against their needs or what they want, they're going to hate you that day and they're going to wish you were dead. So he says, the point is, just always do the right thing. So you know what? If they love you or hate you that day, it doesn't matter as long as you're doing the right thing. And so that really helped out a lot, of course. I was like, okay. And he's right. So, and let's be honest, John, when you're maybe not for you, but for some guys, you know what? For some guys, it's tough. You're a cop, you become a sergeant, maybe never in a leadership position before. And most people want people to like them. And I can understand that, especially when you're young. So it's tough, to actually say things that are going to put people at odds with you. So it is tough, and that's why we need good mentors. We lost a lot of veterans in the police department. We need good mentors and good leadership training for cops that make that transition, or even sergeants as you move up in your career and you climb the ladder, to understand that, hey, you can still be good and be nice, but you got to do the right thing. It's not about them loving you or liking you for that day, but doing the right thing, because ultimately, when you make the right decisions, you're doing the right thing for them. They may not see it right there and then, but at some time, it could be a week later, months later, years later, eventually they will see it, but at least you're doing the right thing. And that's part of being a man, right? We talk about being a man. So being a man is doing the right thing for the right reasons. So Villas Ventores, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts, $20. Here we go. The COVID protocols were all lies. Stop the spread in 2 weeks was nothing more than a way to give people false hope. Any institution or person who supported or enforced that trash is never to be trusted. Yeah, a lot of people are not to be trusted in this. Absolutely. VSS Ventores also says, here's another $10 coffee and donuts. Being a man means treating others the way you would want to be. I agree. That's absolutely right. You should definitely show people respect. You don't have to respect them, but you should show them respect. And not only that, because, as a man, you're going to have children, families. Your families should see a good representation of who you are. That said, you have to be firm but fair, and also be wary of others. And just came off the comment. Let me see if I can find it. But bottom line is, you're right. Being a man and human nature as a whole. Yeah, you're right. But the bottom line is, being a man is not easy. I can say that. Being a man is not easy because you're not really born a man. You have to learn how to become a man. That's why I say being a man is not easy. To become a man, you have to go out there, work hard. You have to get a good job. You can't just go off on good looks. Most men can't go off because, you want to become a model maybe, but most men are recognized for the hard work, how they can provide for the family, how they can protect their family. That's how men are measured, right, in life. So you have to grow and become that man.
Yeah, no, and I think being a supervisor in the NYPD is extremely difficult, if not impossible, especially today. But you want to laugh? So we got about 1,100 people on here. We were just talking about the ever-growing corruption scandal in New York City, where now 2 detectives who work for DOI are coming forward that they had the allegation very early on that there were a corruption, shakedown, extortion scheme happening within the ranks of the NYPD, stemming all the way up to the police department, the police commissioner. And because they were properly investigating the case, they were targeted. So we just spoke about that. But you want to laugh? Pat Donahue just sends me this. This is hysterical. This is absolutely hysterical. So the NYPD actually honored whistleblower Frank Serpico 50 years later. So we just spoke about Serpico. We brought up his video where he testified in front of the NAP commission. Serpico said, he spoke out against the corruption that was happening in the lower ranks of the NYPD. So more than 50 years after Frank Serpico testified about the endemic corruption in the New York City Police Department, the department finally recognized his service and injury in the line of duty with an official certificate and inscribed Medal of Honor. The former undercover detective, 85, received the honor in the mail Thursday, the Daily News reported. Serpico testified in December 1971 to a panel appointed by Mayor John Lindsay to investigate police corruption, breaking the blue wall of silence. the protection that fellow officers sometimes give each other, such as refusing to testify. Al Pacino went to portray him in the hit 1973 movie Serpico, and his story is also related in the book by Peter Moss. Current Daily News and former Associated Press reporter Larry McShane interviewed Serpico in December about the 50th anniversary of his appearance before the Knapp Division. I felt that I finally was going to tell the world, and nobody's going to interrupt me, Serpico told the newspaper, speaking from his home in upstate New York. I thought I know the truth. Every single word was mine, and it came from the heart. Serpico was shot in the face during a drug arrest in Brooklyn in 1971, months before he testified, and has maintained that the officers he was with never made a call for an officer down. While the department gave Serpico a medal recognizing his injury in 1972, it was handed over without ceremony in the accompanying certificate, he told the newspaper. In recent years, the department has awarded medals to recipients at large annual public events. Mayor Eric Adams responded to the coverage, saying Serpico's bravery inspired my law enforcement career. Frank, we're going to make sure you get a medal. On Thursday, Serpico tweeted a photo of the framed Medal of Honor and certificate that reads in part, in recognition of an individual act of extraordinary bravery in the line of duty. He has continued to speak out about corruption and abuse by the police since his retirement in 1972. He has supported and listened to other whistleblowers over the year, including those who testified about the now terminated stop, question, and frisk policy. In 2017, he publicly supported Colin Kaepernick, who protested against racial injustice in the NFL. So, you know, like I said, I think with the Serpico thing, but the funniest part about this whole thing is he wouldn't go to One Police Plaza for the ceremony. And the people that awarded him for this, the people that awarded Serpico this medal were Eric Adams and Ed Caban.
Talk about a paradox, huh?
Yeah.
Talk about irony. I know the stuff that Serpico talks about with Colin Kaepernick. I don't agree with all that stuff, but when it comes to the police department, he's absolutely right. He's been sounding the horn for years that there's no avenue to actually report corruption. I think the best takeaway is what he said. I think that resonates. The dishonest should not have leverage over the honest. The dishonest should fear those that are honest. There's no doubt about it, especially in law enforcement with integrity. But I think it's great he wouldn't come to One Police Plaza. I mean, to me, he said, listen, I know you guys are actually possibly more corrupt than what we had during my days. I mean, he's not going to One Police Plaza. So, you know what? A lot of respect for that, though. I agree with that. A lot of respect for that. Shout out to Serpico for that one.
Frank, I'll come with you if you ever want to go to Police Plaza. I have no problem.
You want to go?
I like to let everybody see my face every now and then. So, yeah, it's yeah. So, I mean, I again, like I said, I don't think that we were shocked by any of this. You know, I read the article. It was like, oh, all right, yeah. So, all right, these guys are finally coming to light, telling exactly what's going to go on. And there's going to be a lot more stories if they ever come to fruition. If people tell the truth, there'll be a lot more stories that are going to come out of DOI, that are going to come out of the Internal Affairs Bureau. And I think as the tale rolls on, you're going to see a lot more. And obviously, Finest Unfiltered, New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast, the Sal Greco show, we will be at the forefront of bringing all of that to you, as well as, you know, we are working with getting some other talent and other shows that are going to come on here in the hours past this show. So Sal Greco's show is going to go on at 12:05 today. Him and Marlon Bethel did a show. I'm sure they're covering this, or they will cover it, and a couple other things that happened. So, yeah, there's a lot more. We got a lot that happened over the weekend that we didn't get to, but we're already at like 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm sure tomorrow, I think we got a pretty good episode lined up. We'll talk about that. And, yeah, I mean, I don't got anything else. Eric, you got anything before we get out of here?
I'm hearing, I don't know how true it is, but I'm hearing that John Shell got approved for his 3 quarters. So I wonder what the future events will hold. I know he's not going to be held accountable for his unprofessionalism and recklessness on social media. We haven't seen anything. Clearly, Mayor Eric Adams is still running the police department. There has been no discipline or any accountability for the Gotham brothers in their pissing matches on social media. So, if anybody gets a chance, check out the article by Harry deceitful Siegel, referred to by John Shell. But Harry Siegel, great job, put out an article about the pissing matches that he faced from the upper echelon of the police department, which includes John Shell, Tariq Shepard, and Kez Daughtry. So the bottom line is this. Stick with us, the Finest Unfiltered. We're a family here. We're growing together. Our friends and listeners, thank you so much. Got a great channel here with Sal Greco. Marlon Beth will be on the show. Marlon does a lot for us behind the scenes, real analytical, intelligent. He was investigated with the NYPD, so he does investigations now to this day. Bottom line is 4 masculine men that should still be employed by the police department are no longer there. But you know what? We could do more now in retirement and make more of an impact now, just as our friends and listeners. A lot of guys that are there that are active right now. We know what you're facing right now. We understand that we want to help you make a major impact here. Hold on for the ride. I know it's been tough, but hopefully some real changes can be made. And I think looking forward to this next mayoral candidacy and this potential election hopefully could change a lot. So, John, thank you, brother, as always. We'll see everybody tomorrow, 8:05 live. Jack, behind the scenes, thank you so much for helping us out. We appreciate it. 5:05 tomorrow, Pacific Coast. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, one more thing I forgot. Wednesday, 08:05, we're going to have retired cold case lieutenant commander Tom Joyce is going to join us. Tom's always on the live chat, so that's going to be a good one. Don't miss that. Appreciate all the love, all the support. Thank you, guys. We'll be back at you tomorrow.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.